Get a hit set up.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Two Guys and a Bible right here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. We are delighted to be with you today, and I'm delighted that my co-host, Dr. Don Preston, is with us today. He was out on last week, but he has returned, and so we are grateful to have him here. How are you doing, Don? And hope you're rested up and ready to go.
Well, I'm absolutely not rested, I can tell you that. You know, sometimes you get so tired, you just feel tired on top of tired on top of
Yes.
tired, and that's kind of the way I am. We, as I started to tell you before we came on air, we left Estes Park, Colorado yesterday morning about 6:30. We did not get in until about 9:30 last night. Our GPS, somewhere out in Colorado, told us that there was major construction, that we had to take a detour. It sent us on a 250-mile detour. And
Whoa.
It took us, and I kid you not, it took us on highways 109 and highway 160. I did not know that there were still such desolate, empty, absolutely nothing areas left in the United States. We would travel for up to 10 miles. We're talking straightaway stretches that, you know, if a guy had a hot rod, he would just be bound and determined to loosen it up and see how fast it would go, because there's absolutely no one out there. But we would travel for as many as 10 miles without seeing a single other vehicle. It was just, it's like, okay, we're sure going to hope that we don't break down out here. And naturally, we had no phone service out there. So if you break down out there, it's like, my goodness gracious, we're going to be sitting here for 3 days before anybody drives by. But anyway, we finally got back on our road. We got within 45 miles of the house, and it was about 9 o'clock, and a doe deer decided to commit suicide with my truck. And I was about 60. Oh, yes. We were going a little over 65 miles an hour. It had turned dark, of course. It was just in that gray area between dark and light. And I saw movement out of my left-hand side and immediately recognized it for what it was going to be. And I started hitting the brake, and one deer was in lead. I managed to swerve and to hit her. Well, all the while, I was telling my wife, I said, you know, it's absolutely amazing how many things can go through the human mind all in a split second. You know, it's like, there's a deer, got to swerve, da-da-da-da-da-da, and then just as I missed the first one, I was immediately thinking, there'll be another one. There's got to be another one. They always travel in pairs or more, and sure enough, here comes this other one, and she was in full tilt boogie. I mean, she had panicked, completely panicked, and she was bound and determined to get across no matter what. And, of course, by this time, I'm full on my brakes. I mean, I'm coming down as hard as I can. And I had already swerved so much that I felt like if I swerved anymore, it would be an overreaction. And overreacting is for certain to get you killed in situations like that. You're going to go, off into the Tules, and you're going to hit trees and fences and all that kind of stuff. So I knew I'd already swerved as much as I could swerve, but I was hitting the brakes as hard as I could, and she made it to the passenger side, and I hit her. And I hit her hard, and it did about $5,000 worth of damage to my truck. So,
man,
yeah. Thankfully, when I hit her, she didn't come up. Do what now?
I said, don't you hate that?
Oh my goodness!
You can't hear me?
Yeah, I can now. But I told Jan, I said, here's the irony of this. Altogether, we put almost 2,400 miles on the truck, right? And we were in Estes Park, Colorado, and there were elk all over the road. We didn't even come close to hitting an elk, thankfully. And we get within 45 miles of home, and we hit a deer. After driving all that distance with virtually no incident whatsoever, this deer runs out in front of us, and it's just one of those type of things. It's the very first time in my life I've ever hit a deer, and I've lived in deer country most of my life, and you're constantly hearing of people in this part of the country killing deer, hitting them, or you're driving down the road, and lo and behold, there's a dead deer that somebody hit. So it's not at all uncommon. And I can't tell you the number of times that I have personally seen deer and had to avoid them, but never, ever, ever was it like that last night. I mean, it was just, there it was. And I've got pretty fast reactions, even for someone my age. And I managed to hit to miss the first one. And so I thought, okay. And then, boy, here comes the flash. And there was literally not one thing I could do about the second one. She was just there, and we stopped, went about a half a mile, pulled over. Wasn't any other traffic out there. Jan said, we better examine it, see what it looks like. And, of course, it's dark. And I told her, I said, well, we can't tell all that much about it. I was watching the gauges. The radiator was not overheating, all of that. There were no service lights come on. I said, I think we're okay. But anyway, got out, looked at it, and I said, well, probably between $1,200 and $1,700, $1,500 to $1,700 worth of damage. But again, it's dark, and I can't really see. The minute I walked out this morning and stood in front of the truck, I'm going, uh-oh. This is not going to be $1,500 to $1,700. This is going to be a lot of money. And sure enough, took it to two different body shops, and it's a good chunk of money. But it is what it is,
Well, I'm sorry.
The great thing about it is when I hit her, she didn't roll up on the top of the car and try to come in the window. Had we been driving Jan's car, or Jan's car is such a low slung car that it probably would have knocked her right straight up into the window. And I was doing probably 65, not quite 70. And if that deer had come through the window doing that fast, it could have been really, really a dangerous and threatening situation.
Oh yeah. It sounds dangerous anyway, when you talk about hitting an animal like that. was coming from Dallas one night, and I saw one. I've never been that close to hitting one, but I mean, we have them here in Memphis too. As a matter of fact, there was a place right down from our house on Winchester where there we always would see deer. So I mean, they're around, and fortunately, I haven't, and I hope I never do. But that is one of those situations that I'm sure you couldn't avoid, and I just hate that it happened.
Yeah, it's it's amazing how quick adrenaline can flow through your body. It's just poof.
Oh, absolutely.
And after it's over, you're just going, "Oh wow, woo wee!" But we had a great trip. We went to Santa Fe, New Mexico first, and of course, we were taking this trip to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary, and went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that is a tourist trap deluxe. That's about all I will say about it. It's a beautiful setting, a beautiful city, and it's just it's just one tourist store after another. And as I've said many times, I'm not a very good tourist. I'm not a great shopper. I can't say that for my wife now. I must say she's a great tourist. She's a great shopper. So, but nonetheless, let's see. The night before 2 nights before we left, we were down on the square, and they had some bands, and we found out later that they will have 2 bands a night all the way through August the 1st. And so we got to go the first 2 nights, and it was the very first band at the very first night that was the very best. I actually took a a video clip, and I tried to send it to you because I knew that you would really enjoy the music. But the clip was just simply too long. I couldn't get it to send. For some reason, it just simply wouldn't do. But it was, I mean, they played good music. And I was just, of course, I'm about as musically inclined as a rock, as I've told you on many occasions. And but they had a guitarist and then a bass guitarist, and I know you've played a lot of bass, and as well as some other instruments. And they had a drummer that was just out of this world. And they turned him loose on one number. And my goodness gracious, that was fun. That guy could rock.
You have to upload the video somewhere and then send it to me.
I'll see if I've still got it. I had to go through and delete some of my stuff, but I think I've still got that one, if I'm not mistaken. But what was so funny, it really was, is that there was an open area down in front of the bandstand, and of course people got to dancing down there. And I walked up beside one guy. He and I started visiting just a little bit, talking about how good the music was and what have you. And I said, well, there's an old saying that says, it is better that people think you a fool than it is to open your mouth and to prove them true. I said, I would modify that just a little bit and say, it is better for people to think that you have no rhythm than it is to get out there on that dance floor and to prove that you have no rhythm. There were some people out there that looked like they were chickens with their heads cut off, flailing around with absolutely with no rhythm, no rhyme, no grace in their movements. They were just jerking around. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? You are absolutely true, and I think I see who you're talking about.
After you get a certain age, hey, just call it good exercise and go for it.
They had 200 people out in front of the bandstand just a grooving and really carrying on and dancing. And, everybody was just having a good time. It was quite a deal. but boy, they were a good band. The other one was good, but they just didn't. I don't know how to express it. The first band seemed to be just having such a good time jamming together. The other band seemed to be more professional, canned. They just didn't seem to be having the good time that the first band was. And to me, that just made the first band the more fun. They were so relaxed, but boy, oh boy, were they good musicians. My goodness gracious. They were really good.
Well, that's what made it. I mean, they enjoyed playing and playing together. Playing music is like it's an experience of communicating. And and you do that through your instrument and your playing and your connection with the person who is next to you or playing with you, whether it be like in the rhythm section, that's going to be the drummer, the keyboardist, and the bass player and the guitarist. And so there's a language that we're actually communicating in that process. And a lot of times we're bouncing off of each other as we do it. And then the melodies are played on top of that. So, when you're really into it, I mean, that's the way it happens. I mean, everybody just grooves. And then, of course, if you're just there to just play and do a show, I mean, there's no fun in that at all. And that's, the music is not going to be the same. You're not going to feel the same. And the audience reaction is not going to be the same.
Well, I hear what you're saying, and that was precisely the way I felt about it, of the difference between the two bands. To me, the second band was there to put on a show. They were just playing. They were there, but that first band, you could just tell they were having a ball, and boy, you could tell by the body language that, as you were just saying, they were playing off of each other. They were taking cues from each other, and of course, again, I'm certainly not a musician. I just simply have no musical ability whatsoever. I've always kind of related to Animal of the Muppets, wanting to play the drums, but I've just never been able to do that. But again, it was just the synchronicity of everything, and how that first band just was having such a good time with each other. The audience is great for them to be there, but I think those guys could be in a back room somewhere and just jamming among themselves and would have been having the same identical good time. And they had a gal that was playing the fiddle. Oh my goodness gracious, that young woman could get down on that fiddle. She was just flat good. And so it really was a great adventure there in Santa Fe. I personally didn't have as much fun or as much enjoyment there as when we went to Estes Park. Estes Park is a little bitty place, comparatively speaking, but to me it was just a little bit different of an environment. No music, no entertainment like that, but I actually enjoyed it more.
Something happened to you, Don.
For one of our anniversaries, and so it was very, very enjoyable.
Well, that sounds great. Glad you were able to get away. Leora and I took just a little short weekend trip down the road just to relax and clear our heads. She did get some shopping in, and I think that was the highlight of that trip. She went shopping 2 or 3 times. But other than that, I mean, it was good. So we got some things planned in the future, but I only had a little bit of time to just, kind of get away. But again, it was very relaxing. It's always good to be able to do that and just enjoy yourselves. So, if you have quite an extended, trip and opportunity to relax, enjoy yourself, and, do some things that were just, enjoyable and cultural experiences, that's very good. So happy for you.
Yeah.
And I know you're excited, ready to go and get back in the saddle. Good.
Well, I'm going to be back in the office in the morning. I had some necessary things I had to get caught up with today for sure. I'll be back in the office in the morning and doing some experimenting with filming and what have you. Speaking of which, I do need my intro and outro. I hope those are finished by now. And so I'm really getting keyed up and primed up and everything to go on the air for the TV program. I understand that you're already having some good response to you being on air, so really excited about that. But I've got a lot to do to get ready to be on the air.
Right. We should have, I know one is already prepared, and I'm checking with them to make sure that the other one is done. So I'll send that to you, and we will see how it works.
All right. Very, very good. Well, I obviously did not have anything planned for tonight. As I mentioned at the very beginning, my tired is tired. I'm just deep down exhausted still. When I went to bed last night about 10:30 or whatever it was, I didn't wake up, and you know me, William, but I didn't wake up this morning until 6:15, 6:30. And for me to sleep that long is just literally, I just don't do that. But Jan said, I literally did not move all night long, not one time. She said, I didn't turn over, I didn't flip-flop. She said, I literally did not move. So I knew that I was tired, and I'm still tired. I'll probably not move a whole lot tonight either. But was there something that you covered last week that we could pick up on for this evening's program and kind of carry on from there, or what do we want to do?
Well, what I talked about last week was actually, does all mean all? And I took the text in Acts chapter 3, Acts chapter 3 and verse 18, and the basic premise was that the text there says all things concerning Jesus' suffering he fulfilled by the mouth of all the holy prophets. That's not the exact quote, of course. But, and so in that context, he uses a statement and he says that all things that were spoken by the mouth of all his prophets that Christ had to suffer, he has thus fulfilled. And whether or not there was anything that was lacking from the prophecies related to Christ's suffering that was yet to be fulfilled, or that, had to be fulfilled sometime in our generation, as opposed to being fulfilled in that time. And then just basically walk straight through the text to demonstrate that the same writer recorded the same speaker using the same language to the same audience to talk about, speaking from the same source, to speak of all things spoken by the mouth of all the holy prophets related to his return. And what was the difference between all things spoken by the mouth of the prophets in verse 21 as opposed to in verse 10? So, that was basically the lesson, but I also developed it into precisely what the promise of Abraham was, and showed the connection between that promise and the grieving of the chief priests and the Sadducees who came upon them as a direct result of preaching that promise, which they spoke of as the preaching of the resurrection. And then, of course, I tied that into Romans 11. So that was the heart of that, particular study and lesson. So if there's anything there that you want to pick up on and go with, we can do that.
Well, I'm sure that you
there's
did.
Always.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was just saying,
was...
there's always some things there. And
yeah.
The other, is I think I'm having some problems with our mic because I couldn't sign in on Skype. I had to use the direct connect, and so there must be some type of delay that's going on. So just go ahead, and I'm going to sit back here. Yeah, I'm going to sit back and let you go ahead, and I'll find a convenient place to come in because we keep kind of running
Okay.
over each other due to this delay.
Yeah, there seems to be a little bit of a delay, and you're dropping out just a tiny bit. You might see if there's anything you can do. When you said that you covered the significance and meaning of the word all, I have been absolutely amused in almost a sad sort of a way on Facebook as I encounter these futurists who say they were former preterists, of course, and they absolutely go out of their way to deny the meaning of all in prophetic text. And they insist, and of course, one thing that we must keep in mind here is the fact that most of those who are doing this manipulation of the word all are also Calvinists. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory manner, but there very often is an underlying presuppositional ideology behind this approach to the word all. But just recently, and I've written a series of articles in response to this, but this goes back actually to 2006 of what I'm going to talk about very, very quickly. In 2006, I wrote an article on Luke chapter 21 and 22. And of course, I remember you, William, telling me what a profound impact Luke 21:22 had on your thinking as you discovered it years and years and years ago. Well, it did on me as well, because there it is. I mean, it's what the text says. These be the days of vengeance, in which all things that are written must be fulfilled. And I remember when I encountered Luke 21 and 22, I literally kept trying to find ways to escape it, to avoid it, to argue that away. And I tried to give some explanations that are being offered once again by a lot of people today trying to avoid the power of Luke 21 and 22. And Kenneth Gentry, somewhere along 2009, wrote an article. He later expanded that article and put that article in his tome on He Shall Have Dominion, which is kind of the modern day Magnus on postmillennialism. Magnum opus is what I was trying to say. And so Kenneth Gentry approached Luke 21:22 by saying, well, this is typically bad exegesis on the part of these hyper-preterists. He said, they do not even honor what the Greek text says. And he takes note that in the Greek, it is, these be the days of vengeance, in which all things having been written must be fulfilled. And Kenneth Gentry says, well, see, the key to understanding what Jesus meant was that he was saying that all things written at the time that he made this statement, in other words, everything that's already been written before I'm talking to you right here, right now, all of those things will be fulfilled in the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. I got to tell you, when I read Kenneth Gentry's attempt to deal with Luke 21:22 on that, I just literally shook my head going, how in the world can somebody be so illogical, so wrapped up in a worldview and in an eschatology that they simply cannot see, or they refuse to see the illogic and the self-defeating nature of their own argument. So I wrote an article, and I said, here is what Kenneth Gentry argues. The all things having been written refers to all things that have been written when Jesus spoke those words in Luke 21 and 22. What that means is it is all Old Testament prophecy. And I made the comment in that article. And by the way, folks, that article is posted on my website, donkpreston.com. And I said, so Kenneth Gentry's argument is in the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, all things having been written at the time that he spoke those words in Luke 21:22 would be fulfilled again in AD 70. So that means all Old Testament prophecy would be fulfilled in the events of AD 70. And I said in my article, I will gladly accept Kenneth Gentry's argument on this. But Kenneth Gentry obviously has not thought through his argument very well. Because I said, again in the article, all things written in the Old Testament would be fulfilled by AD 70. But in the Old Testament, it foretold the coming of the Lord, the judgment, and the resurrection. Therefore, since all Old Testament prophecy would be fulfilled by AD 70, and since the Old Testament foretold the judgment, the parousia, and the resurrection of the dead, therefore, the second coming, the judgment, and the resurrection were fulfilled by the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Therefore, Dr. Gentry has completely and totally destroyed his own eschatology. Well, that was in 2009. Here we are today. Kenneth Gentry, to my knowledge, has never written a word in response to that article. But just recently on Facebook, a guy named Jason Bradfield, who is certainly one of the most caustic, hateful young men that you will encounter. Unfortunately, he actually is an associate pastor at some Presbyterian church, and I shudder to think of what it would be like to have someone like Bradfield on staff. He is so acerbic, so caustic, so hateful that I just can't imagine that. But all of that aside, he attacked me on Luke 21 and 22. And he said, well, one must admit that on a casual reading of Luke 21:22, it seems to support the hyperpreterist, that's his term, the hyperpreterist view. However, all one has to do is to look closer. And I was thinking, well, okay, he's going to take Gentry's view. But he didn't. If I were speculating, and it's nothing more than speculation, I don't have firm evidence or proof of it, but if I were speculating, I would say that Jason Bradfield knew of the article that I had written in response to Gentry and knew that Gentry's article simply would not stand up. It was weak, it was flawed, it was illogical. So Jason Bradfield took a different approach. And he said, the problem with Preston on Luke 21:22 is that he fails to see that the word all can be qualified. And that's what I heard that you were addressing last week in pointing out the fallacies of those who want to limit the word all in the context and to misapply the word all in those contexts. So, Jason Bradfield said what Preston fails to realize is the word all there, when Jesus said, these be the days of vengeance in which all things that are written, he said what Jesus meant there is that all things concerning the fall of Jerusalem, the days of vengeance on Jerusalem, that's the all of Luke 21 and 22. And of course, I'm sitting there reading that going, yes, you're exactly right. The problem of it is when you look at everything that the Bible has to say about what Jason Bradfield called the particulars. That was his word. He said that all things concerning the fall of Jerusalem and the particulars thereof were fulfilled in AD 70. In other words, everything attendant with the fall of Jerusalem was fulfilled in AD 70. And once again, I'm sitting there going, yes, I agree with that 100%. That's the whole point. So I began developing all of the, quote, particulars. I spent a couple of different articles, several actually, from the Old Testament, pointing out all of the constituent elements that the Bible attaches to the fall of Jerusalem in these Old Testament prophecies. You have the passing of heaven and earth. You have the Messianic banquet, the wedding, pardon me, the resurrection. You have salvation. You have the new heaven and the new earth. You have the kingdom. I mean, all of these are constituent elements that in the Old Testament are absolutely 100% connected to the fall of Jerusalem in the Old Testament prophecies. So now I'm coming to the New Testament. I'll be posting another new article tomorrow on my website based upon Matthew chapter 23. But when you look at the New Testament predictions, that like 99.9% of all biblical commentators say, yeah, that was a prediction of AD 70. Yeah, that's absolutely the fall of Jerusalem. Okay, when you look at all of these New Testament prophecies that the scholars admit and agree apply to AD 70, and you look at the particulars, again, to use Jason Bradfield's own words, that are connected with that event, then you soon discover, guess what? You're talking about the most fundamental of the eschatological tenets found in the New Testament. I mean, all you got to do is look at Matthew 21 and the parable of the vineyard. You have there, this is all about the coming of the kingdom of God. It's not only the judgment of the wicked husbandman and the taking away of the kingdom from them, but giving it to a different nation. And this is the time of the Messianic temple, as we have already discussed in this series that we'll get back to next week. And then in Matthew chapter 22, you have the constituent elements of the wedding of the Son, the kingdom of God, the avenging of the prophets. And so the point being that when you have someone like Jason Bradfield, who claims that he was a full-blown preterist for a good while, but I got to tell you, when someone writes today what they do, all the while claiming that they were a knowledgeable full preterist, it honestly makes me wonder how knowledgeable they were, how firm they were in their convictions about covenant eschatology. For someone to say that eschatology is in no way related to the fall of Jerusalem, it shows me that, number one, they're totally ignorant, and I say that as kindly as possible. They're either ignorant of what the Scriptures say, or number two, they have decided to simply turn their back on what they know the Bible does teach about the relationship between these eschatological and soteriological elements that are indirectly, or not indirectly, but inseparably tied to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And so it's stunning on the one hand. It's shocking, and it's certainly sad when you read people like this make such ill-grounded, ill-founded, illogical, and unscriptural comments as to say, oh, sure, everything concerning the fall of Jerusalem and the days of vengeance and all of the particulars surrounding the fall of Jerusalem, all that was fulfilled in AD 70. That doesn't have anything to do with eschatology or soteriology. I mean, I'm sorry. That's just so horribly bad. And so that all gets back to what you said you covered last week, if I understood what you were saying correctly. When people start ignoring or distorting the definition of all things being fulfilled and making such incredibly bad arguments to avoid and to escape the force of all things written being fulfilled, then to me it's pretty revelatory that they know their position won't stand up. it simply cannot stand up to the light of scrutiny. So I just wanted to toss that in. That's what came across in my mind, William, as you said you talked about the all of prophecy being fulfilled.
Yeah, I mean those things. Whereas I didn't get into all of those specifics, but I mean they were definitely a part of it. But just dealing with the basic, fundamental argument, and especially comparing it with the all things that were related to the death of Christ. And I haven't heard a single person ever raise an issue that any single prophecy or prophecies that were related to the fulfillment of Jesus' death on the cross had not been fulfilled. None of them ever attacked the word all on that event. And so I did, carry it into the eschatological outgrowth of that because, that was definitely what was in the text. And touching resurrection, you thereby touch all of those other topics that you've just mentioned and more. And that's the conundrum that these guys fall into when they start trying to use that particular logic, like Joel McDermott did during the time of your debate with him and these guys that you and I debated on Facebook tried the same thing, and people constantly do it. I mean, I've had it happen several times in Hebrew Israelite debates, and they'll walk through the passages and claim everything was fulfilled except this and except that, and they got all these exceptions to all things being fulfilled. And it just shows you, as you were saying, the weakness of the position that they occupy and that they take on those particular passages. And it also shows you the strength of the statements that the Lord made regarding the fulfillment of all things. I mean, he couldn't have put it in any more succinct and comprehensive manner than the way in which he stated those things. And to see that all of those constituent elements that are part of the fulfillment of all things will fit that paradigm. I was listening to Michael. I think his name is Michael Heiser. Is that him? Michael Heiser.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, he did, it was about a 4-hour presentation, but I had to listen to him on double speed. But he was speaking about a lot of things that pertain to the time of the end. Now, he didn't take any solid position on anything, which is sometimes kind of characteristics of the way, some of the professors do when they approach these subjects. However, some of the things that he was saying was opening the door to people to examine the preterist view by pointing out some of those correlations that related to 270 AD and saying that they refer to the time of the end and the nature of those things. And what I really wanted to address was the fact that, he was saying that just because a passage may have a spiritual fulfillment doesn't mean that it's any less literal and real than looking at it from a physical perspective. And he was sort of comparing the dispensationalist view and with, and Christian Zionism with a little bit of the preterist view and views that see things from that perspective. And of course, he gave the illustration. He says, let's take God. He says, God is spiritual. He says, is he any less real than you are? So I thought it was a good illustration from that perspective. But to open the minds of people so that they will see that when the Bible says all these things were fulfilled and they don't fit your physical paradigm that you are trying to impose on the text, the fact that you, based upon context and based upon the limitations within the text for time, would have to interpret some of them, not every single thing, but some of those passages in a spiritual manner, doesn't make them any less real, any less important, and any less fulfilled than if you were putting that connotation on it. So with that, I have to say I appreciated that much of his of his presentation, even though, the whole thing was designed to say, well, we just don't know what it is, and whatever view you're comfortable with, take. And of course, I can't go along with that and support that. But sometimes, you can hear people, offer something that is worthy in terms of their content. And I think, having that mindset when approaching passages that say, these are the days of vengeance when all things which are written may be fulfilled, because that was my first reaction when I looked at that verse. The first thing that I said when I read it, I said, if this text is true, and I, just like you went through it, you pointed out the only things that he could have been talking about at the time were those things that were in the old covenant. So that was the first thing came to my mind. And with our background, with everything fulfilled at the cross, et cetera. And right. So to read that text, that was one of the things that popped up. And, and I said, well, if this verse is true, it cannot be that everything was fulfilled at the cross. And secondly, if it is true, then I need to go back and look at the prophecies in the Old Testament and see if there is a manner in which they can be fulfilled and harmonized with the statement that the Lord is making here. And when I started doing that with texts like Daniel 12 and Isaiah 25 and others, everything began to fit, and it forced me to, in order to honor what the Lord said concerning that time, it forced me to say, well, it couldn't have been fulfilled in any physical way on this particular text and that particular text. And man, changed my whole life from that point forward.
That's an understatement, yeah. Well, it's fascinating for both of us, in more ways. I tell you, it's absolutely amazing the changes that have taken place, and the journey that, to a great extent, you and I have been on together since the early 80s. But I was reading one fairly ancient. I say ancient. He's a 19th century commentator, and it was Newton's who it was. He was actually 16th century or 17th, but Newton made the comment. He said, in the final analysis, it does not matter how you attempt to avoid the force of Luke 21 and 22. All things written means all things written. It is not for us to seek to avoid it, but to accept it. And I know the very first time that I read those comments, and I'd have to go back and double check that reference, but it was a very well-known commentator. And I remember when I read that, and I thought, well, that is a really, really powerful statement. It gives the appearance that this commentator saw the train coming and basically said, I'm not going to deal with this in the fullest implications. I'm not going to deal with it by writing a tremendous amount on it. I'm just simply going to lay it out there of what it means. And what it means is all things written means all things written. Deal with it. And and that's really the challenge. But again, it gets back to the irony of those who seek so desperately to avoid the force of it. Just recently on Facebook, one of these supposed anti-preterists, a supposed former preterist, pardon me, I should say, was talking about, well, all doesn't mean all in Luke chapter 21 and 22. That's a hyper-preterist construction that does not fit the context. It simply will not work. They're distorting the scriptures. Well, I wrote back and I said, prove it. And I went across some of the very things that we've talked about here tonight. I said, I will gladly accept your argument that it's only all things written concerning the fall of Jerusalem. I have no problem with that. But I said, let's look at the things that the Bible itself ties to the fall of Jerusalem. I said, my challenge to you is you're the one that's got to prove that all things written doesn't mean all things written even if you admit, even if you want to argue, oh, well, it's all things written concerning the days of vengeance. I said, once again, I'll accept that. All things written concerning the days of vengeance on the fall of Jerusalem. I will accept that. I said, I just told him, I said, it certainly seems to me that you see a train coming here. You realize that no matter what you say about the all things having been written, about the days of vengeance, and about the fall of Jerusalem, it's going to come back and to cause you to be a full preterist. And this particular individual likes to talk about the judgment a lot. And he said, oh, yeah, see, Acts 17, 30, and 31, now that's the universal judgment. That's all men everywhere. See, all men everywhere. And I said, okay, that's fine. I said, let's talk about Matthew 16, 27, 28. Well, no. Matthew 16, 27, 28, that was AD 70. That was the judgment of Jerusalem. I don't have a problem with that. And I said, wait a minute. Let's back up here. I said, what did Jesus say? The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and shall reward every man according to his works. I said, now, you're trying to limit that to AD 70. Where do you find that in the context? And about that time, he completely deserted the discussion and decided that he didn't want to talk about that anymore. But that's what you find with these individuals. And as you mentioned my debate with Joel McDurmon, I mentioned in that debate, of course there are passages that define and limit the word all in those contexts. But you can't take that situation and to say, well, I found a passage in which all cannot mean all comprehensive, therefore all cannot mean comprehensive in this passage over here. I said, that's an illegitimate transfer of context. And Joel McDurmon scoffed at me using that idea as if you can use one text to counterbalance or to negate another text. Of course, that's just bad hermeneutic. You don't use one text to deny another one. You just can't do that. And so the attempts by the opponents of covenant eschatology to avoid the power of Scripture. Now, here we are. We're kind of running out of time already. But let's apply that to the subject before us in regard to the Messianic temple. We haven't talked about that specifically on tonight's program, but let's consider the concept of the prophecies of the Messianic temple and Luke 21:22. These be the days of vengeance in which all things, having been written, must be fulfilled. And by the way, I would like to toss this additional little thought out there. I do not believe for even one moment when Jesus said, these be the days of vengeance in which all things having been written must be fulfilled. I don't think he was talking about the all things that have been written up to the point that he spoke those words. I could gladly admit that for argument's sake, as I've already shared, but I don't think that's what he had in mind. As William and I believe, and many others have come to believe it, I believe all of the New Testament books were written prior to AD 70. And I believe that that's what Jesus had in mind. That by the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, all things having been written by that time. Now, on one hand, it doesn't matter. Okay, let me make this point. Because as I have said on many occasions, I have said it in my books, there are no new eschatological promises in the New Testament. The promise of the resurrection, the promise of the judgment, the promise of the coming of the Lord, all of those were Old Testament prophecies found in Moses, the law, and the prophets, according to Paul in Acts 24:13 and following. So, to reiterate the point, you can easily say, you can gladly say, I will gladly admit for argument's sake, that all things having been written refers to the things that had been written prior to the time Jesus spoke the words in Luke 21:22. In reality, I don't think that's what he's referring to. I think he's referring to the totality of inspired revelation, written revelation, what we call our Bible, Old and New Testaments, would be written by the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70 and would be fulfilled by that time. And one of the reasons I believe that, among many, many, many other reasons, is, everyone agrees that the time of the resurrection is the time in which all prophecy would be fulfilled. Isn't that correct, William? Isn't that what people believe?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, that's where
Okay.
it all roads lead to the resurrection.
Absolutely. All roads lead to the resurrection. Okay, since all roads lead to the resurrection, since everyone admits and agrees that the resurrection is the time when all prophecy would be fulfilled, then since Daniel chapter 12 puts the resurrection at the time when the power of the holy people would be completely shattered, then that means that all prophecy, not some, not a little, not even most, but all prophecy would be fulfilled by the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And, of course, that's exactly what Revelation 10 and 11 teaches. But all of that aside, I'm simply pointing out here how important it is to allow the Scripture to interpret itself and how that's exactly precisely what we do on this program. But here's the point in regard to the Messianic temple. The Old Testament contains prophecies of the Messianic temple. We've been sharing a lot of those prophecies. Isaiah chapters 2 through 4, Isaiah 24 through 28, Zechariah 6, which we haven't looked at extensively yet, Psalms 118, 22 through 26. On and on it goes. So, when Jesus said, "These be the days of vengeance in which all things that are written must be fulfilled," guess what we've got? We've got Jesus stating, implicitly, of course, we've got Jesus stating that all of the Old Testament prophecies, including those of the Messianic temple, would be fulfilled by the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And I could already hear someone saying, no, see, this is all things written concerning the days of vengeance. Well, let's not forget that the Old Testament prophecies concerning the Messianic temple also contain prophecies of the days of vengeance that would sweep away the Old Covenant temple and fully establish the New Covenant Messianic temple. So once again, that caveat, that argument, you've got to limit the meaning of all, and you've got to limit it to just the days of vengeance. Well, I'm sorry, you cannot say things regarding the days of vengeance were fulfilled, but not the days of salvation, because salvation and judgment, salvation and vengeance go hand in hand in the Old Testament. They're synchronous events. And I developed this, by the way, extensively in my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution to Romans 11:25 to 27. So again, the power, the significance of Luke 21 and 22, when taken fully into context, when taken, absolutely fully into consideration, absolutely demands that all eschatological prophecies and promises were fulfilled by the time of AD 70. I mean, the passage is simply unavoidable. It doesn't matter if one is talking about the motif of salvation. It doesn't matter if you're talking about the tenet of kingdom. It doesn't matter if you're talking about resurrection. Look, folks, when I was a young man, I heard a very prominent minister in the Churches of Christ say, here's the way that you study. You pick out a subject, and you go to your Strong's Concordance, and you study just that subject. Now, that might sound okay. The trouble of it is, it fails to consider that kingdom and resurrection, kingdom and covenant, or resurrection and covenant, all of these are subjects and tenets and motifs and themes that are so interrelated to one another as to be absolutely totally inseparable. So we do ourselves a complete disservice when we try to say, well, I'm going to study all of the passages that deal with God's vengeance on Jerusalem. Now, that won't have anything to do with the coming of the kingdom. That won't have anything to do with Christ coming in glory and salvation. That's a total misunderstanding of the unity of Scripture and the unity of eschatology. And we will continue to develop that unity and harmony as we continue our discussion of the Messianic temple here on Two Guys and a Bible, on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. But with that, we're out of time. And so with that, I am going to say good night. God bless. Great to be back, William.
Same here, Don.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Don Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.
Okay, let's see.